What is headless? How does it work with Shopify, and why would you care? My name is Isaac, previous CTO of a funded startup and previous tech lead of a 500 million D2C brand. Today, I'm talking about headless for Shopify. Headless just means you don't use the visual side of the website. So Shopify is actually a CMS, which is content management system. And that is the thing that lets you update all the visuals. You got the blogs, you can edit where content is on a page. Headless means you get rid of everything visual and you just use it for creating or managing products, tracking orders, stuff like that. The reason you would go headless is because you can build your own custom front end. So you can make a website on any technology that you want and you just plug it into Shopify like any other third-party service. Think of it like your database. Honestly, I think that's 80% of what you need to know about headless. Knowing anything more is getting a little bit technical, and that's not really what this video is about. The next question, why do brands do this? It really comes down to one thing, which is control. You either think you can build something better than Shopify's out-of-the-box CMS solution, or you want to plug into something like Contentful to manage all your content, or Shopify is not going to build features that you need because you have a very niche and specific website. This is obviously quite time intensive to build. It is also expensive to maintain. So now not only do you have to maintain the stuff that's going on the website, you also have to maintain the infrastructure, which Shopify handles all of that. Out of the box, you also don't get support. So with Shopify, it can be like, hey, this isn't working on your platform. If you build your own platform, you guys are the experts. Like who do you call? And then you also get additional costs for, hosting it and maintaining it, because now Shopify is not hosting it. You have to pay somewhere else to host it. So obviously sounds very difficult. Again, why do brands do this? It is case by case and it's kind of dependent on the brand. However, I'm going to tell you about the use cases that I see that are trends, that they seem to be in one form or another with every brand that makes the transition. Number one, speed optimizations. So now that you've decoupled yourself from the Shopify front end, you can basically use any technology you want. You can decide your own caching, your own rendering, your own network hosting, all of that stuff. I will say Shopify is pretty good. I think a lot of people think, oh, we'll go headless and it'll be faster. And it's like, Shopify is pretty good. The thing I tend to see that really slows down Shopify is when you're coding inefficient things on top of it, like you're not using Shopify's built-in functionality, and also, primarily, it's apps. If you use apps for all the big functionality on your website, they tend to hog resources. And I believe the main reason behind that is, if I build an app, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that it is looking the best it can possibly be, right? I don't really care about anyone else's app. So as you get more apps on the store, they're all fighting for different resources. Then there's no like scheduling between them. And the Shopify developers don't have access to this code either. They can't change what's happening. So imagine you've got 10 different people on the site trying to hog resources and do what they want to make their thing perform the best. It's just not organized and synchronized. If your site is getting to an unreasonable point where it's just too slow and clunky and you are seriously considering the headless transition, I always recommend starting with building out an API layer for your third-party services. So Shopify is really good as a CMS. The tools are really easy to edit and update. Everyone on the team is going to be comfortable with it. And honestly, they're pretty good with optimizing and rendering base website stuff. So if you try any of their basic themes like Dawn, which is all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they're really quick. And they have a built-in CDN, which means images load pretty quickly. If you can strip all of the apps away from the Shopify layer and control it yourself, this is where you start having a better control of your service. If you were going to start a headless build, there are a few different components of the website anyway you need to build. So there's the whole website itself, which is the visual that you go through. You've got some sort of like API data layer, which is for every app that has some sort of interaction with your product. So let's say it's a product recommender or some sort of bundle builder. There is functionality that's not actually on your website. Now that you're not using Shopify's apps to do this, you kind of need to build them yourself, and they will essentially live in your own server data layer. And then you also have the checkout, which is sort of a separate thing. The thing that causes the most difficulty on Shopify is almost always the data layer. So I would recommend just building that out first. For references, imagine how fast your Shopify would be if you deleted all your apps. Obviously, it would not do the functionality you need, but point being, that's where the bulk of the problems are. And if you started working on that, it would be a lot easier. Shopify do some excellent work on optimizing their base site. They just can't manage and optimize an entire marketplace of people building tools. If you wanted to get the speed optimization, I would recommend starting with those, with migrating the apps to be something that you control yourself, and then just see where it is from there. Because if you were going headless, you would have to do this step anyway. So why not just take the biggest one first and then decide if you need to do the rest? Just my 2 cents. Number 2, check out extensibility. Shopify is kind of limited to what you can do on the checkout, which potentially some good reasons for that, right? Like you don't want people to just access people's card details and you need a level of security. However, it's also in their best interest because they have a payment provider, which is that pay app. So they kind of want you to use this because they get customer data. It just works best for them. But it means you can't really customize things. Recently, the checkout blocks became a Shopify Plus feature, which means you can now, like, I guess, add and edit some of the things on the checkout, but you don't really have the same control as you have with the rest of the website. Moving to your own checkout would mean you get to decide what payment gateways you want to use. You could not even use Pay if you want. It could be Stripe, could be PayPal, whatever. And generally tends to be the big one is you get complete control over the visuals and the steps. So I was working with a brand once that wanted to implement a click and collect functionality at the checkout stage. So you would put in your information, and then after you've entered your shipping details, it would show locations near you that included something, blah, blah, blah. And that's difficult to implement on the native checkout that Shopify has, especially if you want custom functionality and visuals. Another really cool thing you can do is you can get A/B tests on the checkout. So at the moment, you don't really have any control or flexibility over like visuals and how things work. But if you can integrate A/B tests, you can try different flows and formats, make things longer, smaller. And it's also, you can tell how important this is based on data. If you get a lot of add to carts, and then a lot of starting the checkout, but the conversion rate is a lot lower, there's probably something wrong with the checkout. I will say building your own checkout is a very delicate system. When I was working at Pretty Little Thing, which is one of the UK's biggest fast fashion retailers, we had an entire team just to manage it. They were migrating from Magento at the time and they wanted to build in React. They started by building out the services separately. So they actually built the checkout while keeping the original site on Magento, which, again, if you are going headless, I don't see why you wouldn't sort of build these things incrementally as steps. So if you wanted to come away from Shopify checkout, you could just build your own checkout service and then use that and Shopify sort of in a headless way. But yeah, point being, it is resource intensive and very risky because you have to manage all the payment gateways yourself. But potentially worth the rewards if you're making enough money and you can get preferable amounts from payment providers. So yeah, point being, it's very delicate. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. You need a team to maintain it. And you are also manually dealing with all the payment providers, which can be technically complex. However, if you're a big enough brand, maybe you get a preferable rate from the payment providers. It can work out financially beneficially. And then third reason, which I'm not going to say is the least valid reason, but sometimes people just want to be able to use more popular technologies because that's where they find the best technologists. So honestly, there's not actually that many great Shopify developers out there. I know it sounds crazy, let me land, but it's kind of a new technology and it's still somewhat niche. Most people are fantastic with websites and visuals, and Shopify does let you do a lot of the HTML, JavaScript, CSS stuff, but it's actually a lot easier to find people that use React or Node or these different tools. My personal recommendation, I think sometimes people get a little bit trigger happy because they hear, headless, we can optimize, we can do all these things. You kind of can, but Shopify itself is actually pretty good. You're looking for this big, 20% jump, and I just don't know if that's you building and maintaining your own system is going to be able to compete with Shopify anyway. Obviously, if you have an excellent team, it really does pay off, and at a certain size makes sense. But I would always recommend incrementally doing it. So start with the data layer, whatever apps you're using that are kind of inefficient or hogging resource, do a big audit, find out what is the most expensive thing on the network, and then build your own version so that you can control how the data works. You can optimize it in your own way. And bit by bit, just keep building on top of it. If you have the data layer, it's going to make the transition to your own website 10 times easier anyway, because you've already built half of it. And you don't have this risk of just like switching entirely from one service to another. But yeah, I hope this was useful. If you are currently in the process of transitioning to headless, or you have done it, I'd actually love to hear your thoughts. Super interesting to talk about. Let me know in the comments.